The glowing white screen of the laptop cast a harsh, unnatural light against the worn, wooden grain of our kitchen table. Tuna's hand hovered nervously over the small plastic mouse. Her fingers, calloused from years of pulling stubborn weeds and sorting heavy harvests, were trembling just slightly. She had spent the last 2 hours meticulously typing, double-checking margins, and calculating complex numbers for a massive wooden pallet contract. But now it was time for the final step. She stared at the small black printer sitting silently in the corner of the room, looking at it as if it were a trap waiting to be sprung. Slowly she pushed her chair back, her bare feet retreating from the desk. She couldn't do it. For weeks, Tuna had bravely embraced the digital work of our growing farm. She had learned to navigate spreadsheets, organize buyer schedules, and track our inventory. But whenever it was time to generate the actual paper, the irreversible physical proof that goes out into the real world, she would quietly step away. She would find me in the yard, hand me the mouse, and softly say, "You do the final click." The responsibility of permanence simply felt too heavy for her to carry alone. Hello, friends. Welcome back to our quiet corner of the world. In a family like ours, we are intimately used to fixing mistakes with our own 2 hands. If a row of seedlings is planted too shallow, you dig them up and replant them before the sun sets. If a box of tomatoes is packed wrong, you unpack it. But a printed contract, once the black ink hits the crisp white paper, there is no undo button. And today, that invisible safety net was about to be pulled away completely. The morning had started like any other quiet day on the farm. Outside on the front porch, a small bowl of leftover rice porridge sat next to Henry's tiny, dirt-stained sandals. The bamboo leaves rustled gently against the corrugated tin roof, a familiar, comforting rhythm that usually brought a deep sense of peace to our home. But today, that fragile quiet was violently interrupted by the low, guttural roar of a heavy diesel engine. A massive commercial transport truck was idling right outside our bamboo gate, kicking up a thick cloud of yellow dust that drifted slowly over Tuna's carefully tended vegetable patches. The driver was leaning casually against his cab, smoking a cigarette, checking his watch. He was here to collect the pallets, and he could not leave without the official, signed invoices to legally transport the goods across the province. I was nowhere near the house. I was out back in the dirt yard, completely absorbed in a mechanical disaster. Our old tractor had blown a gasket right in the middle of hauling heavy timber, and I was elbow-deep in the scorching hot engine block. Thick, black grease coated my fingers, seeped deep under my fingernails, and smeared aggressively across my forearms. The heat of the late morning sun beat down on my neck, mixing sweat with the dark, pungent oil. Through the open window of the wooden house, Tuna's voice called out over the noise of the idling truck. It was soft at first, tinged with that familiar protective hesitation. She stepped out onto the porch, holding the laptop tightly against her chest like it was a fragile pane of glass. "Alex," she called out, her eyes darting nervously between the screen and the waiting driver. "The document is ready, everything is typed and checked. You just need to come inside and print it. The driver is asking for the papers so he can leave." I looked down at my hands. They were dripping with thick black sludge. I grabbed an old frayed rag from my back pocket and tried to wipe them, but it only smeared the grease further into the lines of my skin. If I even looked at a piece of clean white paper right now, I would ruin it entirely. I walked toward the porch, stopping carefully at the edge of the bottom step so I wouldn't track dirty oil onto the clean wood Tuna swept every morning. I looked up at my wife. The panic in her eyes was real, a quiet storm brewing behind her usually calm, capable demeanor. The safety net she had relied on for weeks was gone. "I can't touch it, Na," I said gently, holding up my blackened hands to show her the undeniable reality of our situation. "I can't even open the door right now. You have to do it. You have to format it, press print and bring it out here to me. I literally cannot help you." Tuna stared at my hands, taking in the grease and the dirt, and then slowly looked back at the idling truck. The loud rhythmic rumble of the diesel engine seemed to echo the sudden terrifying weight of the responsibility settling onto her shoulders. There was no one else left to do the final click. Tuna turned slowly, the heavy wooden door closing behind her, dulling the harsh rumble of the truck's engine to a muffled thrum. She walked back to the kitchen table. The silence inside our small house suddenly felt thicker, heavier than the stifling midday heat outside. She sat down, the old wooden chair creaking in protest, and gently placed the laptop back onto the surface. Her right hand, calloused from years of gripping a hoe and hauling heavy woven baskets, wrapped around the small, smooth plastic of the computer mouse. It was a jarring contrast, the rough, tactile reality of our farming life meeting the sleek, unforgiving demands of modern administration. On the screen, the official contract glowed back at her. She moved the cursor. It glided across the white digital page, hovering just inches from the small printer icon at the top corner. But her hand froze. This is a hidden barrier that no one warns you about when you try to elevate your family's livelihood. When we are out in the dirt, mistakes are tangible, and they are fixable. If a wooden pallet is nailed slightly off-center, we can pull the nail out. If a bag of fertilizer spills, we simply sweep it up. But the digital world is a strange illusion. For weeks, Tuna had felt safe behind the screen because of a single comforting concept: the ability to undo. You delete a wrong number, you fix a typo. It feels abstract. It isn't real yet. But pressing print changes everything. It takes an invisible, digital file and turns it into a permanent physical object. That piece of paper would travel hundreds of miles away. It would sit on the polished desk of a foreign buyer who had never seen our worn hands or our dusty yard. If the margins were misaligned or if the numbers were formatted incorrectly, they wouldn't see a hard-working mother trying her best. They would just see an unprofessional farm. That fear of judgment, that invisible print anxiety, was paralyzing her. She scrolled through the document one last time, her eyes scanning the black text, terrified of missing a hidden error. The minutes stretched on. The cursor continued to pulse on the screen, a tiny blinking reminder of her hesitation. Outside, the truck driver hit his horn, a short, sharp blast that rattled the thin glass in our window panes. Time was running out. Just then, a soft padding of bare feet broke the tense silence. Little Henry wandered into the kitchen, rubbing his sleepy eyes from his afternoon nap. He walked over to the desk, barely tall enough to see over the edge, and leaned against his mother's leg. He looked up at the glowing screen, then over at the dark, silent printer sitting in the corner. Henry knew the routine. Whenever I printed shipping labels, the machine would vibrate the entire table, spitting out loud, mechanical grinding noises that always made him jump. Anticipating the racket, Henry smiled, raised his tiny hands, and pressed his palms tightly over his ears. He stood perfectly still, looking at Tuna with wide, expectant eyes, waiting for the magic noise to begin. Tuna looked down at our son. He wasn't afraid of the machine. He was just waiting for her to make it work. In that quiet moment, the afternoon sunlight streamed through the slatted wooden window, illuminating a cloud of golden dust motes dancing in the air between them. She realized then that this wasn't just about a piece of paper anymore. It was about who she was becoming. If she wanted Henry to grow up confident, to not be afraid of a changing world, she could not let him see his mother defeated by a simple plastic button. The burden of our farm's future couldn't just rest on the physical labor of my grease-stained hands. It had to rest on her courage to claim her space in this new reality. She took a long, deep breath. The tension in her shoulders, pulled tight for the last 30 minutes, finally dropped. She turned her eyes away from the safety of the screen, gripping the mouse firmly. Without allowing herself another second to doubt, she moved the cursor over the icon, and her calloused finger pressed down. Click. For a split second, there was absolute silence. Then, the heavy mechanical whir of the printer filled the quiet kitchen. Henry let out a muffled giggle from behind his hands as the plastic machine vibrated against the old wooden table. Tu Na leaned forward, her eyes locked on the device. Slowly, the first sheet of paper slid out, landing softly in the output tray. Then the second, then the third. When the humming finally stopped, Tu Na reached out and picked up the stack. The paper was still warm from the machine's internal heater. She ran her rough thumb across the crisp edges. She scanned the top page, her eyes tracing the sharp, perfectly aligned black text. The margins were flawless, the numbers were exact. There were not any typos. This is the true hidden reward of overcoming that final barrier. All the invisible abstract anxiety, the hours spent staring at a glowing screen, the quiet fear of not being good enough, had suddenly transformed into something tangible. Holding that warm stack of paper, Tu Na realized she had not just printed a contract. She had printed physical proof of her own capability. The intimidating gap between the digital world and our physical farm had been successfully bridged, not by someone else, but by her own two hands. Tu Na pushed open the front door and stepped back out onto the porch. The afternoon sun felt entirely different now, casting a warm, golden light across the dusty yard. She walked past the bamboo gate, past the loud, idling truck, and walked straight toward me. I looked up from the broken tractor engine. She held the clean white documents out to me. Careful not to ruin her perfect work, I wiped my greasy forehead with the back of my arm. I took the pen she offered, hovered my blackened fingers delicately over the bottom of the page, and signed my name. I handed the clipboard to the waiting driver, then looked back at my wife. The hesitation in her eyes was completely gone, replaced by a quiet, steady strength. "Perfectly done, boss," I said softly. A small, proud smile broke across her face. As the heavy transport truck finally pulled away, kicking up a fading cloud of dust down our rural road, Tu Na did not rush back inside to hide. She stood on the porch, watching it go. Our wooden house felt lighter, the heavy pressure of the morning replaced by the comforting warmth of a family building their life together, step by step. True growth isn't about never being afraid. It is about choosing to press forward even when the ink is permanent. Tomorrow, there will undoubtedly be new contracts, new numbers, and new invisible fears waiting at that kitchen desk. But for today, she simply turned and walked back into our home, her footsteps firm, confident, and entirely her own. Have you ever faced a moment where you had to push past your own fear of making a permanent mistake? We would love to hear your story in the comments below. If this quiet moment on our farm brought some value to your day, please share this video with someone who might need a little encouragement.